we should talk about Liz Truss. Yes, this week she came up with the rather startling announcement that she was going to launch a free speech social media platform this summer, inspired no less by Donald Trump's Truth Social. It's yet to be named, but Truss Social seems the obvious choice, does it not? I just wanted to tell a quick story about. I don't know Liz Truss very well, but I think after I stopped being political editor and just after I started News at 10, I was asked to do this charity event called Turn the Tables. One of the people involved in it is the BBC correspondent James Landon. I don't know if you've done it, but the idea is, for those who've never heard of it, which will be most of our audience, is that basically it's a chance for a leading politician to interview a journalist. That's why it's called Turn the Tables. And I was asked to do it, and I was due to do it with Amber Rudd. And then at the last minute, I think she was Home Secretary at the time, she dropped out. And so on the day I turned up, and it was Liz Truss, who was then, I think, the Justice Secretary, who was interviewing me instead. And I didn't really know Liz Truss. And she did this interview with me, which was very, very funny. I mean, taking the piss out of me constantly for about 20 minutes. Not that hard, you might argue, but it was funny. And I thought to myself this week, what happened to that Liz Truss? Where's she gone? She seems to have gone further and further down this very sort of, I don't know, what would you call it? Narrow alley, really, is that, you know, since she was Prime Minister, and you've talked before about how you thought that in some aspects about the establishment, in inverted commas, I don't think you quite use those words, you know, she did have a little bit of a point, and you've made that, and I think it's very interesting that you've made that point over the years. All that said, she does seem to be going further and further off to one particular side, and I found myself thinking this week, what happened to the Liz Truss that was doing that interview with me 10 years ago? I mean, what do you make of it?
Look, she's always been a bit reckless. I mean, when she was Justice Secretary, as you probably remember, she alienated most of the judiciary, and it's sort of amazing that her career survived what was a pretty big setback then. I mean, look, she's great company. I'm not surprised that you know, I've done Turn the Tables. I'm not surprised that it was quite fun. And she can be lively and amusing. And she's not thick. She just is reckless, and she too often thinks she knows best. And although I think, and I've said this repeatedly, I think the Bank of England did let her and Kwasi Kwarteng down in the run-up to their notorious mini budget. Nonetheless, their judgments were in the mini budget, the unfunded tax cuts, were appalling against a backdrop of growing investor concern about rising inflation and rising interest rates, falling government debt prices. So they made some spectacularly poor judgments, and partly because of the incompetence of the Bank of England, but mainly because of her mini budget, you know, the government came close to not being able to borrow. I've talked about that in the context, you know, the much more scary context of America. But her term in office was a disaster. And, you know, therefore, the thing that sort of is, I suppose, quite striking about her desire, her determination to follow Donald Trump's lead in creating what she says is a social media platform where there'll be no censorship and people can really talk freely, is if you look at the value, market value of Truth Social, which I think is still a few $1 billion, almost its entire market value rests on the fact that people want to know what the next extraordinary decision that Donald Trump is likely to make. They want to know that. And he has an exclusive agreement with Truth Social that all his pronouncements will only go out on Truth Social. So people have to look at Truth Social to know, you know, what the latest shock to the global economy is going to be, or, you know, the next extraordinary development, you know, in these Ukraine peace negotiations is going to be, or what's going to happen in the Middle East. You have to read Truth Social to know what's going to happen to the world. I don't think you have to read Liz Truss's, whatever this thing is called, feed, to sort of learn about what's going to happen. You know, I mean, even within our own home. I mean, let alone the world. So it seems to me this is an ambitious project, shall we say.